Hello, fourth graders, and welcome to another video science test review. This is Mr. Passafume, of course, and we are talking about igneous rocks today. So let's go ahead. Hopefully you have your picture notes open in your notebook and you are ready to follow along. I guess the first thing I want you to notice is the side cut view of Earth. We're not going to go into too much detail about the different layers. You're going to be doing that a lot more in 5th grade, but it does help us understand igneous rocks a little bit. Basically, in the very middle of the Earth, it's called the inner core, okay? And then you have the outer core. It's kind of like this really hot melted rock, but because there's so much pressure on this inner core that it's kind of hard. Then, towards the outside, you have the mantle, which is the brown, and that's going to be more just rocks, minerals, dirt, all compacted. It's really hard. Then, on the outside of the mantle is a thin layer of magma. Magma is this melted rock that results from the pressure of this top crust layer scraping up against the mantle. What we did in class is we went like this with our hands and they started to get hot. Well, in the same way, these plates are rubbing up against the mantle like this, and so because of that friction, that heat starts to develop and the rocks actually begin to turn into this melted liquid called magma. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, here is a side cut view of Earth. Here is another side cut view, but it's much more enhanced. We're zoomed in. We're looking at the side cut of a mountain now. So you can see the crust right here, and you can see right below the crust is the magma, this melted rock. The same thing that we made reference to up here. Now, some of this magma actually bursts open to the top of the crust. Sometimes also it slowly oozes out the sides. Once the magma gets to the top of the crust, the name of it actually changes to lava. So it's the same kind of stuff, but because this one is underneath the crust and this one is on top of the crust, the name actually changes. It's magma underneath and lava on top of the crust. Alright? So once this lava gets on top of the crust, because it is much colder outside than this intense hot magma, this magma is going to cool off pretty rapidly. Okay? Lava that cools really rapidly on the outside of the crust is called extrusive igneous rock. We talked a little bit about in class how the prefix EX means outside. Okay, so extrusive igneous rocks is rock that comes from melted rock, and because it cools on the outside, it's called extrusive igneous rock. Now, basically what happens is when this magma cools, the slower it cools, these crystals start to form. So once again, the slower it cools, the bigger the crystals. Well, because of this really hot magma gets exposed to the really cold air, or relatively cold air compared to the magma, this magma cools off really fast. And so, because it cools off very fast, not a lot of large crystals form. You can actually see this here. And I made these crystals probably a little bit too big. Many of the crystals in extrusive igneous rocks you can't even see. But this stuff definitely gets very hard. Okay? Alright, the next kind of igneous rock is the intrusive igneous rock. Okay? And the prefix in means inside. And this type of rock never actually gets on top of the crust. It may find a pocket where it's not quite in the magma and it's not quite on the top of the crust, but it may find like a little pocket where it's not exposed to the continuous flow of magma. So once it gets into this pocket, it can cool off, but it can sometimes take thousands of years to cool off because it's not exposed to the really cold air that it would be if it would have made it to the top of the crust. So because it cools very slowly, like I mentioned before, the slower it cools, the bigger the crystals. The intrusive igneous rocks have very large crystals, and you can see those there. Now this is cooled magma because it never gets to the top of the crust. Whereas in this is cooled lava because once again, once the magma gets to the top, it's called lava. Right? Alright, let's go ahead and continue as we talked about kind of how they are formed with all of this information here. What igneous means is fire made. So that'll definitely, you can remember that igneous means fire made. That'll help you remember how they are formed. What are some different properties of igneous rocks? Granite is an intrusive. So it has large crystals and it's multicolored. And this granite is really hard. One of the uses of granite is a lot of people have granite on their countertops. If you see a granite countertop, you can see it kind of shines a little bit because of the small crystals, and it is multicolored. Some other properties of igneous rocks here. Pumice is an extrusive igneous rock. It's very lightweight, it's kind of deceiving, and it has a bunch of holes in it. Because once it came to the top and it cooled really rapidly, gas came out of this rock, and so it made little holes all over the place, and it kind of looks like a sponge. But it is very lightweight and crumbly. The next rock that we're going to look at is called obsidian. And it is an extrusive igneous rock. It has massive crystals. It's those rocks that you see, we saw a picture of it in our book. It's almost all black and it looks glassy. It's very smooth and like I already mentioned, it looks like black glass. What are some other uses of igneous rocks? In soap, sometimes there is pumice. It contains a little bit of it anyway. And there's also gabbro igneous rock, and they use that to make bridges. I believe that is pretty much it. Let me just double check, make sure that we covered everything. Yes, igneous, magma, crystals. Yes, that is it for this 4th grade science test review on igneous rocks. If you have any questions, contact me on Edmodo. But other than that, I think you're good to go. We talked about how it's formed. We talked about some of its uses, what the word means, some different properties of igneous rocks, and you are ready to go.